welcome to Series 5, Episode 7 of In Suspense. I'm Lauren North, and my lovely co-host Leslie Cara is unfortunately poorly today and won't be joining us. But I've got the amazing Phoebe Morgan with me, who's our guest today, and who's also going to just be the person I'm chatting to, which is lovely. So welcome, Phoebe, to In Suspense.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And this is our last episode of the series as well. But not to worry, we're not having a long break. We are back in April. So we're going to be back very soon. So before I start talking to you and chatting and doing all the questions, I'm just going to read out your bio so everybody knows who you are. Although I don't imagine there are many people who don't know the amazing Phoebe Morgan.
So sure there are.
It can't be. Phoebe Morgan is an author and editor. She studied English at Leeds University after growing up in the Suffolk countryside. She has previously worked as a journalist and is now a commercial fiction editorial director at Harper Collins during the day and writes her own books in the evenings. Phoebe's books have been translated into 10 languages, including French, Italian, Polish, and Croatian. Her latest thriller, The Wild Girls, was published last year, and her next, The Trip, is coming out next spring. So all very exciting. I can't believe you juggle both kind of sides of the books and editing. And we are going to talk about that a little bit later. But our topic today is location, 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 because The Wild Girls is set in the most exotic and remote safari lodge. But we'll talk about that later. So before we crack on with all the big questions, Leslie and I like to normally have a little chat about what we've been up to. And last week, you were shortlisted for Editor of the Year by the British Book Awards, which must have been amazing. So how did that feel?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. I did not know that I was shortlisted. So my friend texted me in the morning and said, Phoebe, you're shortlisted for Editor of the Year. And I was like, oh, am I? That's so nice. So yeah, I'm really honored. It's a big sort of shortlisting in the industry. So it's really exciting. But I'm really here because of my authors. I have an amazing list of authors, and they allow me to publish them very well. And it's really heartening, I think, to have that sort of shortlisting after the last year and a half that we've all had and that my authors have had, because I know that we've all struggled in the pandemic. And so it does feel like a really nice piece of news. And I think just across the industry, the British Book Awards are always a really lovely event to celebrate everything from booksellers to marketing to editorial to books. And so I'm really hoping that the get together in May will go ahead and be a live event, because it's been online for the last 2 years, which has been a bit subdued, I would say. So
you don't put your glitzy dresses on for the online ones.
Well, I did so in 2020 I was running the Avon imprint and we won imprint of the year, and so I think we did dress up, but we were just at home, and we did have a drink because it was really exciting, but it's not the same as being there.
No, it's not.
And last year I sort of dipped in and out of it. I think we weren't shortlisted for anything and I was just sort of listening in, but it was that stage at the end of the pandemic where you're just like so over
Zoom fatigued. Yeah.
Zoom fatigue, yeah. But I'm hoping this year will be really fun, and I'm really happy to be shortlisted.
That's great. Well, congratulations again for that. And now with your writing, whereabouts are you with your writing process at the moment? What have you been doing in the evenings? Are you in first draft mode or page proofs? Where are you up to?
I wish I was at page proofs. I am just doing the edits for The Trip, which is book 5, which, as you mentioned, is out next spring. It's out in February 2023. So I had a meeting with my agent and my editor a couple of weeks ago just to go through the structural edits that they've suggested. And now I'm working my way through those. So I've done the first draft, and actually the first draft of this one was really quick and easy compared to, well, just before we started, I was telling you about this awful book that I wrote in lockdown, which I basically just scrapped. So I scrapped like 90,000 words of what was going to be book 5. And then I rewrote an entirely new book, which is now going to be the actual published book 5. So that's been quite a journey, I would say. But I'm happy to have reached the editing stage. And I just need to get through that over the next month or so, I think.
Because I've written a book that's been scrapped, and
oh my God, I'm so desperate to find people that have done it.
Actually, loads of people have, and I was really, really new though, and it was only my second book in the 2-book deal, and I'd I wrote it and I knew all the way along that it was wrong. And because I was so new though, I didn't talk to my editors about it. I was like, this is what they've approved. So this is what I'll write. And I didn't ever say to them, this isn't working. I just wrote it. And then they came back and went, this, you're going to have to write something else. This is not good, and completely crushed me. But what sort of stage did you sort of know that it wasn't working? Did they see it and you had a collaborative talk, or did you just say something, I'm not even showing you this?
So that's so interesting that happened. So what happened for me was I wrote this book, which was called The Trip, but the title is the only thing that has stayed the same.
Yeah. Have you
And
taken character names across though? Because sometimes it's good when you find a good
no,
character name.
no, I was like, I got to start this whole thing again.
Oh,
A bit of the setting is the same, but mainly just the title. So I wrote this original trip in lockdown 3. So it was sort of January, February, March, April 2021, which if you remember was quite a bleak time for everybody.
yeah.
And I think it just wasn't really a thriller. It was sort of very domestic and sort of like a lot of internal monologuing from the characters, and it just about worked as a book. I'm probably making it sound worse than it was. It just about worked, but it was not great. And at the time I just found it really hard. Like when I wrote the Wild Girls, again, I actually just found it like relatively straightforward to write, and this one was definitely like the hardest first draft I've done. So
Mm,
maybe it's the same for you. Like when I was writing, it just felt like I was really wading through treacle.
yeah.
And so I handed it in, and I basically emailed my editor and agent and said, look, here it is. I know that it needs a lot of work, but I want to see what you think of it. So I sort of did kind of hint that it wasn't that
Mm,
great. And then they were really sweet. They didn't actually say you need to start again. They sent me some notes, but the notes were, to me, they seemed so extensive that I thought actually this book is not working.
mm.
And then I had a chat with my editor and I said, shall I just start again? And she was sort of like, so I kind of took that as a yes. And actually,
Yeah.
like she said something which really helped me, which was that she said this is meant to be enjoyable. Of course it's
Mm,
work, but
yeah.
you're meant to enjoy writing and it's meant to be fun and creative. And for me, the idea of going back and editing that draft just felt like it would be some sort of form of torture. Like it just made me
Yeah.
feel really anxious and sad. And actually, once I made the decision to shelve it and write something else, I really felt like I just got my energy back and got my
Yeah.
writing mojo back. And that might be to do with the pandemic easing, it might be to do with all sorts of things, but it has actually been quite an interesting process because I think so much of it is mental, isn't it? About
Mm.
the way you approach writing. And yeah, I think that book just wasn't salvageable, which sounds, I'm relieved to hear that you've done it as well. I did
Yeah,
speak
actually,
to,
lots of people have. I think if you when you
yeah,
ask, you're like, oh yes, yes, that book, yes, that's gone. So, yeah, it's.
okay,
I think
yeah,
it sounds like it was a more positive experience for you. I think because I was so new, it really crushed my confidence massively.
yeah,
But I can now see that I handled it completely wrong, and I needed to be much more collaborative with my agent and editors. And I think I was just so new that I thought, well, no, this is my job to write this book, and this is what they've approved, so I'm going to do it. So
mm,
I think it was all, you learn these things, don't you? Like I won't make that
yeah.
mistake again.
Of course, and
um,
I don't think it sounds like you handled it wrong. And for me, this was my fourth book, and also I'm in the industry, so I guess I have more of a knowledge. Like I don't think writers are expected to know like what to do. Exactly like you say, some people would just think, right, it's my job to write this book, so you almost don't want to show any weakness around it. And I've got a bit of distance from it now, so I'm probably making it sound more positive than it was. But at the time, I really was stressed out about it, and
yeah,
I
it's
thought, oh
very
my God, I felt
anxious.
like I'd really failed. I thought, oh my God, I've completely failed at writing this book. What if I can't ever write another novel? And so I did go through a bit of a
Yeah, of course.
crisis.
Yeah.
I think anyone would, but it's really helpful to know that other people have been in a similar
Yeah, I
position.
think there's more of us out there than you realise. But let's talk about the Wild Girls now, because I'm a big fan of yours, Phoebe, as you know. So I have read all of your books
Oh, thank
from The
you.
Doll's House, which is that was your debut, wasn't it? The Doll's House.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've loved them all. And what I really love about your writing is that you have this way of having sort of an undercurrent of disquiet and tension that just runs all the way through the book, which I loved so much. And The Wild Girls was exactly like that, but also then set in this gorgeous and creepy sort of lodge in a safari setting. So can you start by telling our listeners what the book is about, and for those who haven't read it?
Of course. And I love your books too, Lauren. I think
Oh,
you're
thank
also an
you.
amazing writer, so thank you. So The Wild Girls is set in Botswana in a luxury safari lodge, and it's about four women who are in their early 30s who used to be very close friends but have not seen each other for 2 years. So the book opens with them all receiving an invitation from their friend Felicity, who is going to have a birthday party out in Botswana. So she invites them all to come, and they decide, why not? Maybe it's time to make things right in this friendship group. And the other three girls fly out to Botswana, but when they get to the lodge, it's deserted. There's nobody there. There's a really luxurious meal laid out for them. The lodge is all set up with different personal lodges and then one big lodge where they can all reconvene. So it's sort of this big setting surrounded by water and then surrounded by the kind of wilderness outside that. And so then they're wondering, where is Felicity and why has she brought them all there? And obviously things start to take a bit of a dark turn.
Mhm.
So it's basically a locked room thriller set in Botswana. And yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed writing it because I wrote that one in 2020. So that was during lockdown one. And it was just really fun to write something that was not set within the four walls of my flat. And
Yes.
it felt really escapist to write. And I always love writing about women and friendship and the kind of dynamics between women. And so I had this very small ensemble cast of the four main characters. And I really enjoyed kind of exploring the themes that run within a friendship group, especially in your early 30s, which I
Mm.
guess is my age now. So yeah, it was one of my favorite books to write, I think.
Yeah, and the friendship group was great because you had this, what they all knew what they used to be like and what they're like now, and you do as a person change so much in your 20s and 30s, and then you come back to these people who you've known all your life or most of your life, and you do sort of slip back into sort of earlier patterns, and you think, actually, I'm not that person anymore. So I think it really came across that how the characters were in this close friendship group. And one of the things I really like about your writing is that you have this way of like saying something quite like an ordinary description of something, but making it sound so extraordinary that it really paints the picture in your mind. And one of the examples that I really thought of was as they got off the plane, and they're touching their heels sinking into the tarmac slightly, quite a sticky tarmac. And I just thought that just really painted that like heated setting for me. So yeah, brilliant book anyway. So yeah, I
Oh,
really loved it.
thank you.
So I'd love to know, have you been on safari, and where did the idea come from for the Wild Girls?
So no, I haven't, and I was really worried that that would come across in the book. So I did want to go, and I sort of vaguely sort of planned to go, but then obviously the pandemic hit, and so it was just completely off the cards. But I didn't want to give up on the idea. I would love to go on safari, and hopefully I will one day. But instead, I just had to do a ton of research, which I think is, and I've done that for book five as well, which is partly set in Thailand. And I think, you've got so much resources at our fingertips now. And I watched videos of people arriving at the airport in Botswana so I could try and, give an accurate representation of what actually happens when you come off the plane and,
Yeah.
where are the taxis and where is all of that. And then I read other fictional novels set in Botswana, which was really helpful as well. And just did sort of general research. I had sort of safari brochures, I had all of that stuff. And there was one particular website which had these amazing luxury safari lodges listed on. So I literally described what I could see and it looked incredible. And it was called Deception Valley, which is the name that I lifted and put in my
Oh,
book. So
really?
I
That's
thought,
a
yeah,
real
so
name.
it's a
Place.
real
That's
name.
such a
Yeah.
strange like
Yeah.
name as
Yeah, I
well.
have to send you a link to it because I like it's so incredible. Like you just need to see it because it's amazing to look at. And so it's this place called Deception Valley Lodges. And then I kind of, made it more sinister and added bits on. So in the book, each of the women stay in like a smaller building, which is named after a different animal. So there's like Cheetah Lodge, Zebra Lodge, Lion Lodge, and can't actually remember the other one
Giselle, was
now
it
because yeah,
Giselle?
yeah,
Yeah,
you're right.
Giselle
Yeah,
Lodge, yeah.
well, it's good if someone remembers the books. And then there's this main lodge, which is Deception Valley Lodge. And so yeah, I looked at these pictures of this amazing, beautiful place, and it's incredible. It really made me want to go there. But I also just thought, what a great setting for a novel because they are vulnerable, and you've got this kind of interior menace, but then the exterior menace as well, because
Mm,
there are wild animals around, and it's sort of a dangerous place. There's the water, there's lots of different threats that could materialize. So I sort of wanted to play with that. And the idea actually came from a brainstorm that I had with my agent. My agent is Camilla Bolton, who's also shortlisted for Agent of the Year at the British Book Awards, which is exciting. And so we had a bit of a brainstorm because I just wanted to do something that felt a bit bigger. And my first 3 novels had been set in the UK, and they'd been set in places that I knew quite well. And so I just decided to sort of change it up and do something that felt, a little bit bigger, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. That really comes across as well. I think that just using that setting more, I think, as well. Now I have noticed that exotic thrillers have sort of quite a few more of them are out at the moment. Have you noticed this from the editorial perspective, that you're seeing more of them set in different locations? And do you think that's because of the pandemic and we have all been sat in our homes for 2 years?
Absolutely. I am doing a presentation later this week about sort of global trends that we're seeing in fiction, and one of them is, we're calling them destination thrillers.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that is the better term, actually. Yeah.
Well, no, either, but I think definitely people haven't been able to travel, and actually even now this year there's still a lot of like uncertainty in the world. I know people that aren't that keen to go abroad, and so we're sort of living vicariously through these novels, and so I think that's definitely a thing. There's a lot coming up, set abroad, and it's just that sense of escapism. I think that's what everybody is craving, definitely.
So for anybody listening who's thinking of writing a destination thriller, are they still like sought after from the publisher's perspective? You still keen to take them?
I'm still keen. I think it is obviously becoming a more saturated area of the market. I mean, that's always the way, but I mean, and I specialize in crime and thrillers, so I spend a lot of time thinking about what's coming up and what people are wanting to read. But I do still think if you can execute it well and you can think of a new setting, maybe a setting that feels a bit different. I mean, there was a sort of period of thriller publishing where they were set in the snow, basically. So I published The Chalet by Catherine Cooper, and then there was One by
Ali
One
Reynolds,
by Ruth
The
Ware,
Shiver
there was Shiver, and there was quite a lot in that same space. And so it's almost like, could you think of something different? Maybe not that. Maybe that's been a bit done now. But if you can think of another destination that either you know a lot about or feels exciting to you, or you just think actually that would be great for a thriller, then I would say go for it. I mean, I think it also depends, and this is kind of a wider conversation about publishing, but it depends. You need to find the right editor or the right agent at the right time, because for me, maybe because I published Catherine, I wouldn't necessarily publish too many other people in that area, because I might have kind of got that, and Harper Collins also has someone like Lucy Foley, and Lucy Clark, so we've got like a couple of brilliant writers in that space, but it might be that another publisher actually doesn't have that, and so they might be more likely to acquire your novel because it's a gap on their particular list, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. So my next question is just still talking about location. Are you going to continue now that you've started with your destination thrillers, like the trip? I mean, I'm thinking, is it a trip to the post office with your next book, or is it a more exotic trip? So it is set in Thailand, did you say?
Yeah, so it's a trip to Thailand, and it's about 2 couples who go on holiday to Thailand, to Bangkok, and one of them bumps into a guy from her past who she very much does not want to see. So it's about what happens in the aftermath of that. And it starts with 5 people coming off a plane and being met by the police on the tarmac at the airport.
Ooh.
And then it kind of circles back to them going to the airport and being so excited to go on this trip together. So it's again kind of similar to The Wild Girls in that respect, in that it's got a more far-flung destination and it's got an ensemble cast. So I'm hoping people will enjoy it.
It sounds lovely, and I love the concept of the 2 couples, because there's so much of an interesting dynamic, I think, where you're friends with another couple, because you don't like to argue in front of them, but they see so much of you, don't they, in that situation? So
and I haven't really done that before I've done sort of friendship groups, or I've done sort of married couples, but I'm excited to have these 2 couples, and they're kind of from quite different backgrounds as well. So one couple is a lot posher, one couple is more working class, and so there's a bit of that going on as well. So I'm excited for it.
Amazing. And now I can't have the Phoebe Morgan come on In Suspense and not talk a bit about editing as well, because you are such a powerhouse when it comes to how generous you are with your time, and how you always give away things on the auctions and the raffles for editorial advice, and on podcasts. I know you've been on so many as well, talking about editing, and it's just, you come across as someone who's always so honest and lovely, and I think it's so appreciated in the industry when, you know, it does feel a bit like this big scary thing that no one likes to tell you anything about until you're in it. So I did want to pick your brains a little bit about editing, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for saying that. Yeah, I'm glad it makes a difference.
Oh no, I think it really doesn't. I think it's really helped me in the past as well, listening to you. So can you tell us a little bit about the two careers that you've got, and how they intersect? You know, you said you write in the evening, so it must be like quite a challenge to sort of come home after a long day of work and then do more writing. How do you find the balance?
I've actually stopped doing that. I'm only I'm only writing at the weekends because it yeah, I suppose the more senior you get at work and your job, and I just found doing the evening writing really, really not very productive,
Mm,
because I think my brain was just a bit fried from the day of work. And
yeah.
now if I can have like a clear weekend or just a clear Saturday, I can actually get quite a lot done in one go. I think I'm the sort of writer who writes in sort of big bursts, really like hours of concentration, and then sort of nothing for a week, rather than
Okay. Yeah.
someone who writes a little bit every day. I used to be much more writing a bit every day, or trying to do a little bit and sort of building up the word count more slowly. But now I do it in like these really big chunks,
Yeah.
which seems to work better for me and allow me to balance work during the week, because I think work is just so busy, and it's also quite all encompassing, because
Mm,
it's not really just a 9 to 5. It's also, you know, after the pandemic, hopefully, but like evening events, and there's
yeah.
a lot of reading for submissions. And so I find it easier if I can say to myself, right, okay, Monday to Friday, you're just editorial director and that's your job and that's your focus. And then the weekends are writing
Yeah.
and also reading submissions. But I think it's easy for me to separate them out a little bit now.
Amazing. And when you first started writing your debut, The Doll's House, did you tell your colleagues that you were writing a book, or did you keep it quite secret?
So it was a complete secret, but at the time I also was not in the fiction publishing world in the way that I am
Oh,
now. So when I first started writing it, I was still working as a journalist, and I worked at a sort of local newspaper, and it just was not, yeah, it wasn't really an environment where I knew anything about publishing, or I didn't know any agents or editors. And then I moved into non-fiction publishing, but I was just an assistant. So I was really just sort of publishing assistant, which is admin and a bit of editorial. And so that's when I started sending out to agents. And so at that time, the agents to me were the same as they would have been to anybody else. They were just these kind
yeah,
of really terrifying people online, and I was really intimidated by them, and I didn't know them personally in the way that I do now. I think it would
yeah,
be a very, very different experience like going on submission now than it would have been 5, 6 years ago,
yeah,
because I know much more people. Um, but yeah, but it was a secret, and I can't remember who knew really, hardly anybody, because I guess I just was embarrassed about it. I didn't think I was ever going to get published, and I didn't want to tell people, and then, you know, if they asked about it, I wouldn't have anything to say.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
It's a bit like trying for a baby. You don't like to tell people you're trying for a baby because everyone's like, has it happened yet? You got any news? And you're
yeah,
like, back off.
yeah, exactly. And I kind of thought people would think, you know, who does she think she is, trying to write a book? Like she's not a good writer. You know, I just was quite worried about what people would say, I
Mm.
suppose. Which is probably a bit silly, but
No, I think it is. It's really hard. You do at every stage, no matter who you are just putting yourself out on the line. I think, and it feels quite exposing. I think, to be an author.
yeah.
So I think I can understand why you would have kept it.
Mm.
How did they react when you said? Did you say I've got an agent, or did you wait till you had the deal sort of
I
thing?
just didn't really tell anybody. No, I think a couple of my friends found out that I had got an agent, I think from something I posted online without realizing, and asked me about it. But I had my agent for like quite a while before I actually got a
Mm,
deal. And so that was super exciting, signing with Camilla. I can remember it really well, and it was amazing. And I did tell my family and stuff then. I don't think I had a boyfriend to tell at the time, to be honest. So I think it was probably just my family and like a very select number of friends. But then when I got the deal, I actually didn't make a thing about it until I think I got like the book cover, and then I posted it on social media. And then that was the moment that I actually sort of told people
yeah,
properly.
starts to feel real then, doesn't it?
Yeah, because I just kept thinking it was going to fall through, and I had quite a lot of rejection before I got the deal. And so, you know, I just didn't want to publicize it really, I
Yeah.
suppose. Yeah.
And you've talked about a minute ago about how you scrapped a book, and I think it is really common. So this question is probably coming out on slightly a strange place, but so I was curious to know whether you feel your experience as a professional editor has given you an edge when it comes to editing your own work, or whether you still feel like you need that editor as well. When you're self-editing, do you go about it the same way you would if you were editing someone else's book, or is it just a completely different process?
I think it's quite different. I I don't know, it's a good question. I try to approach it in the way that I would tell my authors to approach it, but it's obviously easier said than done.
Mm,
So I'll always say to my authors, just sleep on it, have a think about the notes, think about what we could do, um, and don't sort of panic. But then when I get the notes from my editor, I'm always like, oh my God, panic, 10 out of 10
yeah,
panic.
yeah, yeah.
How am I going to do this? And so I really like, one time I even read like a blog post that I had written to like try to like remind myself what I had said, because it's really easy when it's your own book to get really worried about it and to
Mm,
find it quite hard. And I think, I don't know really. I mean, I suppose I would like to think I can see things that really aren't working, but maybe I can't. I think everybody needs an editor, and I think you need that third
mm,
party to give you fresh perspective, because by the time I hand it in, I've read my own work loads and
yeah.
loads of times. And so I probably can't quite see it clearly. And also I get attached to it. I think, oh,
Mm,
well, I want to write it this way because this is what I've written and this is clear in my head. And why isn't it clear in your head?
yeah.
Um, but I think you have to accept that if you've got an editor and an agent kind of telling you the same thing and saying, oh, this ending isn't working, or
Mm,
this character doesn't ring true, you got to step back and ask yourself, okay, well, maybe there is something wrong, and maybe a
yeah.
reader would pick up on that as well. And so I think definitely I still need that. I don't think I would ever
Mm,
be so arrogant as to be like, oh, this book's just perfect as it is, and I'm just
yeah,
going to whack it out.
yeah.
So yeah, I think everybody needs that, but I do sometimes struggle to follow my own advice.
Well, that's somehow heartening. I don't know why, but it's quite nice to know. I do think you're right as well, because I always think with my characters, I just know them so well. But everything you know about them doesn't get transferred onto the page. And so I don't
Mm,
think sometimes characters that you think are really likable aren't coming across as really likable because you haven't mentioned like little things. And I think that's why, like you
mm.
say, the beta readers come in handy, and then editors and agents. So, oh, and on that topic, actually, do you send it to like your mum or your boyfriend before like your agent? Do you have a few beta readers?
So I basically have my dad to check for geographical inaccuracies, of which
Oh,
there were many
handy.
in The Wild Girls, and grammatical inaccuracies, also some. So he sort of checks like practical things like that, I would say. Like, so for example, in the trip, it's set in Thailand. So I was talking about, those kind of tuk-tuks that
Mm.
drive people around. And I had said that it was a guy physically cycling, like a man. It was like a manual thing, and he was like, "No, like they
Are
don't
they
use this
little?
anymore. It's all electric now." And I was
Oh,
like,
that's
"Oh right, yeah."
handy.
So just sort of like little things like that, he will check on, and then my brothers. I have two brothers, and they usually read it, or at least some of it, and they are really helpful in terms of like checking plot points and stuff.
Oh, that's good.
And I let my mum read it, although my mum's always just really nice about it, so it's not
Yeah.
always helpful.
But sometimes that's
Um,
just nice though, actually. Like,
yeah, sometimes you just need like a little confidence boost. And yeah, so I do show my family, but no one else really. I don't show anyone outside my
yeah,
family
until
at
yeah.
that stage.
It's
Yeah.
great that your brothers do that. I've got two brothers as well, and I don't even think they read emails and texts that I send them, let alone a single word I've actually written.
Oh
um,
yeah, they are actually really kind. Yeah, they're really good at doing
oh,
that.
that's really nice. And now on to reading. So you must have a TBR pile sky high, and you read your submissions, which you said you do at the weekend as well as your writing. Now, how do you fit it all in? Like, do you feel a bit overwhelmed sometimes with how much reading you have to do?
Yeah, definitely. There is always a lot of reading as an editor. It's just part of the
Mm.
job, and it can be quite intense. The last few weeks, it's been quite intense because it's the run up to London Book Fair.
Yeah.
And so there's been a lot of submissions coming through. And for me, I always want to go back to agents as quickly as I can. And there's kind of multiple reasons for that. It's firstly, I know how horrible it is being an author on submission and having to wait, and I want to be able to kind of, give them an answer sooner rather than later. Also, you've got your relationships with the literary agent, so I don't want to be known as someone that takes ages to come back
Yeah.
or who just doesn't come back at all. I want to have a good reputation with agents, and that's something I work really hard at. And so there is like quite a lot to manage, and sometimes you'll have a submission that starts moving really fast. So you'll get an email like the next day saying, "Oh, someone's taking this to acquisitions. Have you had a chance to
Yeah.
read yet?" Or, "This is going to go to auction by next Monday." And that's quite stressful because you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh gosh, have I got enough time?" And actually, I do think we maybe need to kind of row back on that a bit, because I don't have children, but I always think for editors that do have children,
Mm,
sometimes you can't drop everything. So I just
yeah.
think, and I'm not always sure that it's the best way to find the right match as well, because that's basically then like who's read it the fastest. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
actually, it should be who's actually going to be the best editorial fit and the best
Mm,
publishing home for this author.
yeah.
So, I mean, and agents know that, and they do usually give us the time, but there are occasions where it feels like you don't have enough time.
Mm,
And I feel it's a big responsibility in terms of, I know
yeah.
there's a lot of, feels like I've got like people's dreams on my Kindle in a
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
and
You
I
have.
take that really seriously. And so I want to give every manuscript due consideration
Of
and
course.
try to provide like thoughtful feedback. And sometimes you can't, sometimes I do say, "Sorry, this just isn't right for me,"
Yeah.
or
It's not right. Yeah.
"It's not right for my list," but I try and give like one or two pieces of feedback
Oh,
in,
that's
in
so
case they're
nice.
helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I always remember when I was on submission, I got feedback and I asked my agent to send it all to me, and that was
Mm.
quite helpful, even though it was
Yes. Even though it's
negative in a
no, it's quite
way. Yeah,
interesting,
yeah,
isn't it? To see.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I find
Mm,
that as well. I always like to have all the information. Yeah.
mm.
And so, what are you reading for fun at the moment? Have you got anything good you can recommend to our?
I wish. I'm just not reading anything for fun, and that is just something
Oh.
I need to get better at, because I love reading, obviously, and I really, really miss reading for fun. In the pandemic, I did a little bit more because I sort of had to, because it was
Mm,
one of the only ways I could kind of relax and switch off
yeah.
from the news. But recently, there just isn't time, because you've
No.
always got manuscripts to read. Then you've got your own authors. So I've got a list of about 15 authors. So one of them might have delivered, so I need to read that. And then your colleagues are trying to buy stuff, so they might
Oh yeah,
send stuff
they
around
asked
and
you to.
say,
Yeah, of
can you
course.
can you give us your opinion on that? And so there's always so much work reading.
Mm,
And then you think, oh, I really ought to read some competitors, so if something's number one,
mm,
I maybe should dip into that and see why it's doing so
yeah.
well. So then by the time you actually get to your pleasure reading,
Mm,
it's quite far down the list, to be
yeah.
honest. Yeah, so I'm
I
actually not reading
No,
anything.
that's fine. And I think
Sorry.
actually you're absolutely right, because I think I find I obviously don't have to read as much as you, but I do get books through for the podcast, and books that people ask me to blurb, and I'm reading my own books, and I will help my friends out, and I do mentoring. So I've got my mentees books on the
Mm,
go. And I do get, by the evening, I'm reading fatigue, I think, and I just want to sit in bed now. And I watch this awful series on Prime. It's not awful because I love it. It's called Taken, and it's like Liam Neeson, but like someone else when he was younger, just beating people up all the time. And I just absolutely love it. And there's no plot. I don't have to think. And I think you do get a bit fatigued for doing the same thing over and again, no matter what it is, don't you? I think.
mm. Yeah, you can. And that's the thing as well, because then I also get sent proofs, and I feel so guilty about proofs, because I get sent those as an author, and I really rarely have time to blurb. So
Yeah, of
I hardly ever
course.
do. But then I feel really bad about that. And oh yeah.
No, I think
So
you can only be honest with people, can't you? And
yeah.
just you do what you do, don't you? But I've got a couple of books that I'd like to mention, if that's okay.
Yeah, do it.
So I've
Yeah.
got Nobody But Us by Laura Van Rensburg, which I've almost finished, and it's really great. She really sets the scene of this quite dysfunctional couple. So that's one I'm just almost finished. I've got Sent, New Brighton by Helen Trevorrow,
Oh, that looks
who
good.
yeah, and she is someone who watches the podcast. So hi, Helen. And yeah, it sounds, I think it's described something about Handmaid's Tale meets Blade Runner. So yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to reading that, because I love the Handmaid's Tale. And this
Sounds
one, which I was
amazing.
supposed to start this weekend, but time got away from me with going to a party, which is The Guilty Couple by
Oh,
Callie,
Callie.
which I did sort of say on Twitter, oh, is there any more proofs? Because I would love one. And she so kindly sent me to one. So that is my next read. So I'm really
Oh,
excited about those books.
yeah. I need to read that as well. I used to be Callie's editor, but
I
I've
thought
moved
you
to
still
Pub now.
were.
No, No, not anymore. So I moved across and to a different division, so I don't edit her
Oh,
anymore,
right.
but I have her book to read, so I'm excited to read that. And let me just think of, I want to mention some things as well because I don't want to, I mean, there are lots of amazing books out there, but one thing I really loved was Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister,
Mm,
which is coming
yeah,
out, I'm not quite sure when, but soon.
very
Uh,
soon. Yeah.
and that's amazing. So it's about, she has these amazing high concepts. So it's sort of
Mm,
how can you stop a murder, or can you stop a murder if it's already happened? So it's a woman
yeah.
who sees a murder and then time goes backwards. So
Yeah,
it's like,
by each day, I
yeah, so
think,
it's
isn't
really,
it?
really
Yeah, I've
clever.
not read it yet, but I've just heard amazing things about it. And my friends have read it and have raved about it.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I loved Reputation by Sarah Vaughan. I think
Yeah,
she's an
loved that. We
incredible
had that.
writer.
Yeah,
She's one of my faves. So those are two that I have managed to sort of squeeze in over the last couple of months. I also read
yeah.
Harriet Tice, It Ends at Midnight.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I enjoyed
Who
that one.
was
Yeah.
also great. So yeah, there's lots. It sounds like I only read crime, and quite often I do. But I need to try and branch out into a couple of rom-coms on the
It's
side.
just, well,
Keep me going.
now you mention it, I've got one on neck, Ellie. So,
Oh, brilliant.
it's funny, isn't it? You do generally read in that genre because it's what you love as well. And
Mm,
it's interesting to see what else are people doing in the industry as well and what
yeah.
works and doesn't work. So, no, I read so much thrillers and crime. But we've got our fun question now,
Okay.
which is, and what's the funniest, weirdest, or most embarrassing editorial note you've ever received as a writer or given as an editor?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I don't know. I think there's been quite a lot over the years. I think I remember giving one to Sue Morcroft, who's a sort of women's fiction writer, and I think that
Yes.
was, oh, I can't remember the specifics. It was something to do with how sexy the guy was or something like that. She writes these amazing like romantic women's fiction novels, and she's great at relationships. And there was this one moment I think, well, I was like, oh my goodness, like this guy who's like, maybe he's like too sexy or something like that. So it was around that area. So that was quite funny at the time. And yeah, I'm sure there's been similar in the past. I think maybe I also said something similar to one woman called Laura Jane Williams, who had a book called Our Stop.
Loved
And
that book.
oh,
Really loved
good.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that one, I'm sure there was a guy who was like super sexy in that. So they're mainly around like me being like a voyeur of their male characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I also my most embarrassing comment was also I think to do with couples and sexy men.
Mm.
But this was a romance that I wrote, and this was back when it was just being beta read by my friend Catherine Jones, who does all my. She's like one of the first people to read anything because she's got eagle eyes. And it's like when you've edited something and it made sense, and then you cut a few words, and suddenly it doesn't quite. Sound quite right, but she put a big comment on it. But these man and woman were getting together and having a bit of a touchy time. But I'd edited out hands and it was arms, so they were like touching each other with their arms, which yeah, isn't sexy at all. So
That's
I was
so
like,
funny.
oh yeah. So that was my funniest one.
I once had one as well with the dollhouse, which my mum picked up on, which was again, I think I'd removed words or something, but
Yeah.
it was supposed to be like this really sinister moment where a girl like pushes another woman, and so I was like, oh, like her sleeve was like exposed and her arm was exposed, and then I had said like her arm was like really hairy, and my mum was like, she sounds like a little werewolf. Like I'd like described her like she's like this little animal, and I think I had just like rejigged it, and it wasn't anyway, just completely like lifted you out of the scene because it just made me
Yeah.
laugh. So that was funny as well. I do make mistakes in my books. There was also one that got published in The Girl Next Door, which was, I'm still going to get it wrong, but basically the word I meant was, oh god, I think I meant like a chimenea, which is like, is that the right thing? It's like those
Leslie would
outdoor,
know. I'm like the worst person for
it's so
words.
embarrassing, but like basically those outdoor wood burners that you have in the
Right. Yeah.
garden is what I was trying to say. And then someone on Amazon was like, oh, I think she's using the wrong word, because what I'd actually written was like some sort of dragon. So like as if there was like a little like dragon in the garden.
Oh
Anyway, as you
no.
can tell, I can't even remember the proper details,
Well, that's
but
like the thing is that's
it was
one
embarrassing.
person that's highlighted that, but that stuck with you. Like hundreds of thousands of people have read it, and
I
I said
know.
I've read it and I wouldn't have noticed, but the one person that comments is the one that it sticks,
I know,
doesn't
but I was
it?
like, she is right. Like I got them to change it in the ebook and
Oh,
it's been
did you?
really
Oh,
good.
that's good.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
because it's just completely the wrong word. So it's really
yeah,
embarrassing. But
yeah.
oh well, these things happen.
They do, don't they, to
Yes.
everybody. So sadly, that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much, Phoebe, for being such a brilliant guest and giving us so much time and insight into both locations and editing. So we really, really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And the great news is that you're coming back in the next series as well, aren't you? And Phoebe is going to be our mini-sodes expert for the next series, talking about all things to do with editing. So we're going to do it like we did before with different topics. So if you're watching this and you've got something you really would like to know from Phoebe about editing, then just either put a comment on the YouTube channel or come and find us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter and give us a little DM, and we'll try and make sure that that's included. But I've already got like a really long list myself, so good luck getting in there basically. Then do grab a copy of The Wild Gals, because it is so brilliant and it was already out, and an absolutely brilliant read. We are back on the 14th of April, talking about sex in thrillers. How much sex is too much sex, I think, and that kind of sexy time, which is going to be interesting for me because I'm really one of those people that just leaves them to it. In fact, I don't think anyone in my books is happy enough to ever have sex, but when they do, I don't get involved in it. So, yeah. But it's becoming a real like new part of the genre, isn't it? Like you're getting quite a few sexy thrillers coming out. So
I'm such a prude. I'm going to find that really, I'll probably be like editing it all out. I'll be like, no guys, it's too sexy.
Yes, I am as well, I think, embarrassingly. But that's with the lovely Lizzie Barber as well, who's coming on to chat to us about her latest book as well. And that is everything we've done. So thank you very much, Phoebe. And that leaves me just with the final task of saying goodbye from Phoebe Morgan and goodbye from me. So thanks for watching.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.